welcome back. We get into our Enterprise Watch segment now and we listen to the Minister for Finance, Honorable Neil Reichenberg, who outlines several economic priorities aimed at revitalizing the economy next government financial year 2025-2026, a year that is going to start in April. This was outlined during an interview with our capable business journalist, Nelson Ndlangamandla, where the minister talked about the need to manage public debt, payment of suppliers, as well as sharing whether there will be changes in taxes, further giving a highlight of the budget, which is expected next month.
Honorable Minister, welcome to the show. This is the first show for the year and Happy New Year. We thought we should come to you, Honorable Minister, because we want you to give us the key economic priority areas for this year and maybe touch on the highlights of this year's budget.
Thank you very much, Nelly, and Happy New Year to you too. Thank you. So obviously we are still finalizing the budget for the following year. It is still in preparation stage, even though it's getting close now. The timelines are short, but we are trying to make sure that the budget does encompass all the critical needs. So obviously I'll announce in the budget exactly all the items that are there, but I think what is clear for everyone to see is we'll really try and make sure that we close out some of the projects that we've been working on, like the ICC was more or less closed out this year. It might just need the final touch-ups. The hotel, we're going to try and make sure we can try and get that hotel at least close to getting done with, closing out Lucid Phase 2, really making sure Mkono Gwavuma continues going as well as what it is, coming with new roads projects. Roads is really a priority. So if you talk of 12th Parliament, there's a lot of pressure for roads. And so you'll probably find quite a lot of focus on roads during the budget. But again, it is growth that we are aiming at. So we're going to see what we can do to try and push the budget towards trying to make sure the economy grows. As you know, our economy in Eswatini, we've got a big problem with unemployment and we've got a big problem with poverty. And so the main goal is to say, let us try and push growth, because if we get growth, people get employed and people get better jobs. And people get better jobs and get employed, we come out of poverty. So it solves all these matters. So there's a strong drive on growth. And I'm sure that'll be reflected in the budget.
When we speak on the budget, Honorable Minister, I'm sure business people always look for any new tax reforms. Will there be any changes to the tax this year?
So sin tax is something that we normally do look at, even though we don't try and overload it or try and get too. Normally just adding something small to sin tax might be considered. And again, I'll announce it in the budget speech. But we are trying not to come with any major tax increases. That's definitely what we're trying to do in this term. At the moment, businesses and at household levels are still under pressure, still from the COVID era and obviously all the different unrests in the world. So for that reason, we are saying let us try not to do that, but we are still trying to broaden the tax base. So you might find if there are tax changes, it is trying to close the tax net kind of tax changes, not increase taxes kind of tax changes.
Understood, Honorable Minister. I want us to speak about public debt. What are you doing as a ministry to manage public debt? We have seen suppliers complaining that government is always delaying when it's time to pay them their finances. What is it that you are doing to help these suppliers to ensure that they are put at ease and are able to run their businesses? And is there anything that the ministry is doing to seek more funding?
Okay, so let me start with suppliers. So what we have come from an era of having a stock of arrears in Eswatini, which is a very unhealthy thing to have, is arrears. All you're doing is instead of having a loan, you're having a loan with your suppliers. And it's just very unhealthy because their suppliers charge more, you put your businesses under strain. It's very not the right thing to do that. So we are coming with 2 loans to try and take care of arrears once and for all. 50 million US dollar loans, one from World Bank and one from African Development Bank. They are in quite final stages of being prepared. Hopefully I'll have it in Parliament within the next month or 2. And we are planning that these loans actually do deal with arrears once and for all, is our goal. You can imagine the Ministry of Finance, it is just very unhealthy and very uncomfortable for us too, being in an arrears situation. So that is going to be a strong drive the next year. One of the real big things we want to do in 2025 is to put arrears behind us once and for all. The fact that in December we managed to pay all the suppliers is really just the SACU cycle. So unfortunately we're in a cycle now where when SACU comes in, we try every time to settle all the suppliers. Now, it doesn't mean everything at Treasury is paid. There might be projects that government is still planning to implement that isn't paid yet. Those might not be paid yet, and those will be paid as we get money. But we managed to pay all the suppliers that were at Treasury. And hence we made an announcement just so people understand that if you are owed money by government, it might be stuck in a ministry or it might be in the pipeline. But whatever was at Treasury, we managed to settle, which was lovely for us to do. But unfortunately, you'll find before the next cycle comes in, there'll be a build-up of suppliers, not, timing getting delayed before then. And that's very unhealthy, and we need to sort that out with these two loans. Your next question was on debt. So again, debt is not a major problem in general, but we need to watch our debt to GDP ratio. Yeah. And so at the moment, what we have managed to do, we did grow into more or less the 40% debt to GDP ratio space, which is still a healthy area. If you look at most countries, they're way, way beyond the 40%. We are still very in healthy territory as Eswatini. But we've managed to get the fiscal deficit down, which is causing us to grow our debt to GDP. So our fiscal deficit now, this financial year being just less than 2%. Next year, we're going to keep it low again and keep the deficit low to make sure we don't grow. Our stock of debt might grow, but our debt to GDP mustn't grow. And so that's what we've got to watch. And in time, in fact, even reduce that slowly, the debt to GDP ratio. And so once again, the budget speech will be quite clear on where we stand and where we're going to in the coming year. But we are keeping an eye on that. We're really making sure we don't. So we will continue to take on debt. There'll constantly be loans that we'll be asking for, but understand as we're taking on new loans, we also are repaying a whole lot of other loans in the meantime. And so it's a matter of a rolling stock of debt and possibly even increasing slightly as our GDP grows, but keep it in that healthy 40% debt to GDP ratio.
With the different financial reforms that the ministry has engaged in and money coming in from SACCO, I think the minister is known to say at some point Eswatini will start feeling the changes. But there has been a complaint, Minister, that Eswatini are not seeing any changes. Can we expect anything different this coming year?
So look, coming out of COVID, there was definitely a lot of pressure on household expenditure. You find that during the COVID era, inflation grew and household income did not grow, just meaning that if someone, I'll use a silly example, if someone can go to KFC 5 times a month, they could now no longer go to KFC, or whatever the deal was, but you had to reduce expenditure in households to survive. Now, since 2023, we've really been trying to reverse that. So 2023, we had a double-digit growth in our percentage of expenditure, which is very high. Most countries really can't get to that kind of levels. 2024, double-digit growth in expenditure. 2025, we are hoping to announce a double-digit growth in our expenditure once again. 2023, it's reflected in growth. So our growth, 5%. 2024, we're talking of our numbers are showing 3.5, but because of rebasing, it has brought it down to 3.5. If it wasn't for the rebasing, it'll be far over 5%. 2024. 2025 now, we're talking of 8.3% projection on growth. And these are statistics that are coming with these numbers. And normally we are conservative when we are projecting our growth numbers. And so it's just showing that we are getting the increase in expenditure, which drives household money. The money goes down all the way through somehow to household level. Our growth is showing that it is working, that it is actually giving us the growth that we want, and inflation has been coming down. So even though we managed inflation very well as a country, most countries did a lot worse than Eswatini on inflation, but it has now come down from between the 5 and 6% to around the 4, even below the 4%. So meaning that at the same time, we have also been trying to push the minimum wage. You'll notice the minimum wage in the country are continually increasing a lot more than inflation, because those really are, in December, for instance, we were having problems in the textile industry because for the first time ever in this country, textile workers were starting to pay tax, meaning that they were going beyond the 3,500 Emalangeni threshold. I think some of them had worked overtime, and all of a sudden they were paying PAYE, and they'd never seen something like PAYE before. And there were even some sit-down strikes happening in Matsapa. And ERS had to go there, explain what it's about, and I think everyone understands, and everyone started working again. But it was tough for them to start paying tax. I know it might not be nice, but the fact that they're entering a 3,500 threshold on tax and income should start giving a lot of relief at the bottom end. Most of the big sectors in the country, wages have been increasing well for the bottom end of the industry and for the general workers. And that'll definitely start taking relief off household expenditure. So even people always complain. You'll hear every day people say, "Oh, Gubinje," but really on the ground, according to the numbers and according to what we are seeing, there should start being a lot more relief for household expenditure.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for sharing with us the key economic priorities for this year. We are eagerly waiting for the budget just to see how the country will grow this year.
Right, that was our business journalist Nelsuwe Ndlangamandla in conversation with Honorable Neil Reichenbach, the Minister for Finance, looking at the economic landscape of Eswatini and how the ministry plans to revitalize it in the next financial year. And speaking of finance,